Only you can crown yourself, and we need leaders like you doing just that. We are in uncharted territory on this planet where many of us are learning that we must elevate and sophisticate the technology of our human spirit and energy in order to thrive above the pressure of these computerized times, and then help others do the same. I'm your host, Shakti Sita of The Palace, and this podcast is designed to help you thrive during this really special time in history. Reach your very highest potential, find deeper self-sovereignty, and live your most exalted life. Okay, I'm so excited for this interview. This woman is an absolute powerhouse. She is such an inspiration for me and for this podcast in particular. Literally, I wouldn't be recording today if not for this beautiful person. This is Jenny Miller. She is a absolute beautiful person. She's a healer. She does Kundalini yoga. She is so knowledgeable on so many topics, and I'm excited to talk to her today. So she also just launched her very own podcast called The Soul Path, and she releases episodes very frequently on various topics around healing and yoga, and they're so insightful. You have to go check it out. But I really want to talk to her today because she has a lot to offer, especially in terms of creating things and how do you go through this process of not just creating things, but who you are, because she's gone through so many transformations, not just over her life, but literally in just the last year. So Jenny, thank you so much for coming on today.
You're so welcome, Kristen. Thank you for having me. And it's so fun that I was able to inspire you for your podcast because you have been such a big inspiration to me ever since I met you.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And so for people who don't know how we met, which would be no one but us, we met on the second floor at Rama in Mallorca. We were about to do I think it was 31 minutes of Sat Kriya. And I was like, who's this wonderful person next to me? And I was like, are we going to do this? Let's do this. And she was like, okay. And then we just, it was great. It was just such a vibe. And she was also like a really good student. So like our teacher would ask a question and she like always knew the answer. So I like love people who are like really engaged. So I noticed that about her right away, that she had like, she had answers, first of all. And she was like engaged enough to like answer them immediately when someone asked what they were, and they were also answers to things that I didn't know. So that's where we met. We were in on the beautiful island of Mallorca, and we were practicing Kundalini. It was our teacher training.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so much fun. And then we spent that whole week going to this one Indian restaurant like every day and flirting with the owner. Well, that was me, not Kristen, because she's married.
It was the best. Like we seriously had the best time, and I'll never forget it. It was really such a special time in my life, and that Punjabi restaurant was incredible.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And it fit right in with our Kundalini because there was a picture of the Golden Temple on the wall and some of the Sikh gurus, around the restaurant. So
Yeah,
it
so
was,
like where else would we eat? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
it was decided. So anyway, the first time that Jenny and I went out to eat, it was actually, I think it was at like Mama Carmen's. Was that right? It was like we went to lunch, I think. And I grilled her I'm like, so what do you do? What's going on? Where give me your life story. And she was telling me all about these ideas that she had to start sharing these Kundalini teachings and all these other amazing things that she's learned, Project Prosperity, and also a podcast. And that was such a big topic. And this was back in January, and it is currently August, and she just launched it. So this is huge.
Yeah, it really is. And I had actually forgotten that I was talking about doing a podcast back then. But of course, you were kind enough to send me your whole resource list that you'd put together for Lara with all the equipment, which I'm now using. I think we have the same giant pop filter
to block our face so that we can hide from everyone.
Yeah, it, in case we sneeze, it won't get on the salad bar, that kind
It's
of
like a
thing.
sneeze guard.
Totally. So yeah, I guess the podcast was in the works for quite a while, but I'd sort of forgotten about it until just recently, like right before these recent eclipses. I started telling people again, like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast. And that's sort of one of my strategies when I want to do something is just start telling a lot of people about it, because then I feel like it starts holding me accountable to actually do the thing.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah, I recommend it. But in between, I did start Project Prosperity, which Kristen mentioned, and that was a project where I wanted to teach people some of the prosperity teachings from Kundalini Yoga, of which there are many. There are special mantras, there are special kriyas, there's all kinds of stuff for prosperity, because Yogi Bhajan believed that we should all be prosperous. I mean, don't you want the resources of the world in the hands of people that are awake and conscious? Guru Jagat was just talking about that this morning, how all of the businesses in her little strip in Venice, where she has her yoga studio, have had to close because the landlord is greedy and is just like tripling people's rent, you know? So she was making the point that we need we need people who are awake to have control and have the resources. And I totally agree. So I was doing that and I started a Facebook group and I was doing trainings. And then I just kind of dropped it. I went to Tibet with our yoga studio, Rama. And when I got back, I just sort of wasn't feeling it anymore. And I guess I'm sharing this because I think it's perfectly okay to try something, to start something, to dip your toe in, and then decide that you've gone as far as you want to or need to with it, that maybe it doesn't feel totally aligned after all, and to move on to something else. So I'm not ashamed about that. I'm happy I did it. I learned some things along the way. And now I'm doing this podcast. And I have to say, the podcast does feel 100% aligned. I think in the back of my mind with Project Prosperity, there was always that knowledge that it wasn't totally right. Like I didn't actually want to be hemmed into such a narrow category of only talking about prosperity. I actually like talking about a wide variety of topics. So now I'm doing that on the podcast. And I really kind of think this is it.
That's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that about, trying to find the thing. Like we're always evolving. We're always a work in progress. And I think there's this misconception that it's like, okay, now I am this. Now I'm officially part of this one project that I'm working on or this one business I'm building. Like this podcast is definitely in alignment for you and it's going to keep evolving and it's going to turn into things that you and I can't even conceive of right now. But I see this in so many other people where it's like, you get an idea and then it's like, well, I don't even know if I want to act on it. And what I appreciate about you is that you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to be on to the next one. And like that is so efficient, even though there's this culture around like, well, how am I going to explain this to people? It's irrelevant because all you're trying to do is make the adjustments necessary to get more and more and more in alignment with what you actually want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's really just a question of how can I best serve the collective, So ultimately, it's not about me. Like I can get the ego out of the way, that the part that's like, oh, what if somebody thinks I'm flaky? It's like, who cares? That's just the small ego worrying about something like that. What I'm most interested in is, yeah, just being dynamic and adjusting as I go and finding the thing that is most aligned, as you said, for this particular space and time. And probably as I go, this thing that's starting with the podcast will, grow and morph, and other things will get added into the mix. And some of the people that I admire most in this space of wellness, or whatever you want to call it, are the most dynamic. They're constantly evolving and shifting and pivoting. And I think that's only natural, because when you're on this path of, when you're on a spiritual path, there's a lot of transformation kind of all the time, and
Daily.
when you start paying attention to astrology and the transits, you see that there are these opportunities every day, every hour, to harness the energy of the cosmos, to grow and evolve and transform. And that is what I'm interested in.
I love that so much. It's actually reminding me of something that Tej said during my first week in New York of teacher training. She was saying how you can actually live multiple lifetimes in one life if you're really dynamic enough about it and you're really committed to that evolutionary process. You can transmute multiple lifetimes in one lifetime, and I think that's so fascinating. And I think we're really on this leading edge of that and in the perfect time for that. Like, there's definitely been people obviously who have done this beforehand. I'm not by any way saying that we're paving a path. I'm just saying that we are really in a prime spot for that to be happening, because things are changing so rapidly that we have to change rapidly. Like, the millennial generation has to take on multiple different jobs and try different hats and different things. So how beautiful, because it almost inevitably leads to this transformation process and constant evolutionary gains, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you're right. There have been people historically that have lived their lives like this, but I would say now is the first time that there's kind of a real, like, collective movement of this happening. And it's a small percentage at the moment, but it's those of us who are engaged in this kind of light work, or whatever you want to call it, are living our lives more in this kind of really dynamic manner. And it is forming, we're forming a vanguard, and it's very much of the Aquarian age, which we've just entered into. And of course, it's no coincidence that we've incarnated right now. We incarnated to do this very thing, and I find it extremely exciting.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what you experienced in Tibet? And I don't know if you can even put that into words, but it sounds like there was an obvious transition point where you were kind of like, okay, this is clear that this stuff isn't working anymore, even though you kind of knew in the back of your head that it wasn't going to be like a long-term thing for you. Like, can you talk about that kind of clarity that you gained?
Yeah, it's really hard to put into words what went on in Tibet. It was the style of the trip. It was what's called a yatra, which is a spiritual pilgrimage. And so I went there with our yoga teachers, Guru Jagat and Hari Jivan and Guru Jas, and probably 40 other yoga students. And we went around and visited all these different monasteries in Tibet. And at almost all of them, we got the chance to meditate with Harjivan, which was incredibly powerful. I can't even begin to describe what went on during those experiences. I was definitely seeing into other realms, and I think I was kind of seeing this mystical kingdom of Shambhala that is somewhere in the sky, basically. And it's been associated with Tibet for centuries. And I feel like what I mainly received from that journey was a transmission of the energy that is held in those spaces, in the monasteries, um, into my own aura. And recently I had this healer work on me, and he said, I'm getting a lot of Tibetan Buddhist energy from you. And I said, oh, that's so interesting because I was just there a few months ago.
Wow.
So it was also interesting, though, because it was a very emotional time for me. As much as I just wanted to be enjoying myself, I I think the container provided by this kind of spiritual pilgrimage was allowing a lot of stuff to rise to the surface for me. So I found myself, crying on the bus as we're traversing Tibet. And I had a really difficult breakup back in October. So some things with that were surfacing, but ultimately it was good because it was things about that were still unhealed that I needed to spend some time healing and addressing and releasing. So the trip to Tibet just brought all of that to my attention, even though the timing felt a bit inconvenient. But we don't really get to choose the timing of, when this stuff comes up to be processed.
Mhm.
But when I got back, there had just been a big shift in me, and I couldn't really explain what it was exactly, but I felt different, and I just didn't have the desire, the sort of fire under me any longer to work on Project Prosperity. And then I actually went into a period of kind of going internal for a couple of months there. It wasn't really that fun. I was doing a lot of shadow work. I was doing a lot of work to release this relationship and release my attachment. And I think it was really necessary, even though it was kind of um a not very fun couple of months. But all of that was definitely spurred by this trip to Tibet.
So, I mean, that's like, it's a lot that you're going through there. And, if people can't kind of go to Tibet to kind of have the healing experience and the energetic download and the aura installation, so that they can kind of move forward in life, if people are feeling stuck, what kinds of other things have helped you get out of that kind of a feeling or situation?
Yeah, really good question. Having some kind of spiritual practice will definitely help. If you can just find some time every day to meditate, just something that helps you start tuning in to, the cosmos, the divine, whatever you want to call it, and beginning to tune in more to kind of your higher self or your intuition. And then as these messages, because we're constantly receiving messages, and I'm getting to the point now where I'm really understanding that there's kind of this ongoing dialogue with life. And I really do believe that everything that happens in the external world and with other people is a reflection of our own internal state, for better or worse. And so the signs, the messages are there constantly. And really, every situation can be viewed through this kind of lens. So the practice of tuning in every day to something higher is very useful. And then just starting to try and get in touch with your own intuition, and then beginning to trust it, even when it doesn't make sense. Because often our intuitive guidance doesn't make a lot of sense to our intellectual mind. And our intellectual mind will say something like, oh no, you should continue with Project Prosperity because you only started it a couple of months ago, and you're gaining momentum with it. And the mind will try to convince us otherwise than what we're hearing from the intuition. But what I've found is that by trusting the intuition as I go, I see that what, I intuited turns out to be true. And then I've built this real trust muscle around my intuition to where I now really trust it. And so then it's kind of like I have this barometer and this antenna to understand what's going on. So it can it can help to illuminate what might get us out of a period of stuckness when we're in touch with our intuition. And it can also help to illuminate when a period of stuckness, it may just be kind of a fallow period that we need to go through, or a period where we need to go internal and maybe assess and regroup. Or maybe we will get the knowledge that something is coming, but it's just not quite the timing for it quite yet. And maybe we need to work on this other thing first. So I think, yeah, meditation and spiritual practice and tuning into your own intuition are the two keys to that.
That's awesome. And I second everything she just said. I want to talk more about the process that you went through to just get started and put yourself out there, because I think that, okay, you go through the alchemical process of like listening to your intuition, you get the intuitive hits. Now you have to act on them, and that's really way harder than people like to pretend it is, because clarity and listening to your intuition is one thing, and actually being able to follow through on it is a whole different skill set. And I've seen you navigate that very gracefully with the start of this podcast, and in one of the most like Aries ways possible. It was like, you're kind of like, all right, I'm marinating on it. But like, it wasn't really there. And then the second you were like, okay, it's go time, it was like up on iTunes in like a week. Like now you have a daily episode, you're like going. And so how?
Yeah, you're right. It was very Aries. It was, I think it was about a week after the eclipse, the solar eclipse on July 2nd, or a week and a half, I guess. I woke up that Thursday morning and I said, wow, it's time to stop talking about this podcast and actually do it. Like I have to do it today, is what I felt. And that is
So like
very Aries.
urgency, like complete
Yeah.
urgency.
Yeah, there was this real urgency. And you and I are both Aries.
Yeah.
So Aries sun. So we can both relate to that. When Aries want to make something happen, we want to make it happen quick. We're a bit, impulsive. We just want
In the
to like
best way.
run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I felt. And then I recorded an episode that morning, and I just recorded it on my voice memos on my phone. So I never actually ended up publishing that episode. I instead made a different intro episode with, in GarageBand with a proper microphone. But it doesn't matter that I never published that episode, because energetically I had opened the door on this project and the ball was rolling, and I actually spoke to you on the phone that day, I think that afternoon.
Yeah. And I was just so impressed. I'm like, really? You just woke up, just did it.
Yeah, and you also said something to me. You said, "Don't underestimate the, energetic significance of what you've done today."
Whoa,
And
did I say that? I mean, that
yeah,
makes sense. I would say something like that, because I think getting started is the single biggest hurdle for everyone. Actually, it's one of the sutras of the Aquarian Age from Yogi Bhajan. Start and the pressure will be off.
yeah, exactly, and it's so true, and my mother has always said my whole life, "Begin and the rest is easy," and it's so true, and I used to be a hardcore journalist, and I was always on deadline writing a million stories. And it was so true. I just had to sit down and force myself to start writing something, and then the story would come, So
I do
with the
know, and that is our other link. We were both in the news industry. So,
yeah, that's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
Yeah. But I get that. You just have to start.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I did with the podcast. I just started, And after that first day, I was recording like multiple episodes a day. I felt like I couldn't stop. I had so much inspiration, and it was all just kind of like channeling through me, is what it felt like. Um, and I was doing it all in voice memos. So after a few days, I was like, okay, I need to start figuring out the sort of logistics of this. And at first, it seemed really confusing and insurmountable. And Kristen actually had a lot of helpful tips, like use Libsyn, which I'm doing for the podcast host, and this microphone setup was your suggestion. So, but I was still confused, like, do I need a sound editor? Do I need this? Do I need that? And I just kind of immersed myself in all of it for a couple of weeks. And then at some point, that just became a lot more clear, also. It was like it just revealed itself to me, the process and the sort of bare bones of what I needed. And then I decided I was just going, I did find a sound editor through a friend, and he was working on my official first episode, but I was feeling impatient, and I decided I would submit an episode to Apple Podcasts just as like a trial balloon, because sometimes I've heard they can take several weeks to approve your podcast. And they approved it in one day, which was amazing. So I ended up publishing that episode. And I think I published 3 episodes before the official first episode from the sound editor was ready. And something that um, I was inspired hearing this interview with a podcaster that I admire called Sahara Rose of the Highest Self podcast. And she was talking about how she didn't let technological hurdles stop her at all when she wants to do anything. And so I kind of just decided to be the same way with this podcast. Like, the episodes I've published myself, which is all of them except one, they don't have an intro. They don't have the music because I don't yet know how to add that stuff in. I haven't learned to use GarageBand properly. So all I know how to do is record and then convert it in iTunes and then publish it. But you know what? It's fine.
And it's really great.
Thank
It's
you.
really, really great. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just so impressed with this because I just see people use technological hurdles as an excuse to not do things. And I just love how you're just like, F it, I'll figure it out. I'm going to use my voice recorder. I don't need a mic. I don't need whatever. I know that it's recording and I know that I can get it onto iTunes. And it's so empowering. I can't think of anything, like there's no other word for that other than empowering, because I think a lot of these technological hurdles, and frankly, like, the courses on how to podcast and like, all these companies out there that are like, you need to hire us for sound editing and, no one's going to listen to your show if your sound is off or whatever. Like, those first episodes, get them out there. And if later on, if down the road you upgrade your mic and you upgrade your sound editor and all that stuff, like, great. But like, I just love it so much. It's so in the energy of crown yourself. I just love it. Thank you for
Yeah.
being such a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I think I was letting technological hurdles stand in my way since January. There were times when I went and looked at your list and I had things sitting in my Amazon cart to order, the microphones back in February. And then I would get really unsure and like, oh, but there's so many options. Maybe I want a different style of mic. And so I was doing that for months. But then there was something about, just something lit a fire under me after these eclipses. And I was like, I just have to do this. And I don't care if it's perfect. I have this need to express myself. I have this need to share that with the world. And I'm just going to get it out there however I can, as soon as I can.
So powerful. And, the other thing I want to bring up is, how did you feel? Because I know how you felt, but I want you to share with other people coming into the kind of health and wellness conversation, and spiritual conversation, because there's a lot of voices out there, and aren't you worried about if anyone cares what you have to say? What do you say to that?
I say I'm not worried at all. I feel like I'm I have a particular, well, we all have a different frequency, right? And we could all be talking about the same subjects and we'll all sound completely different and we'll have different points of view and different ways of presenting it. And so there are people out there, I firmly believe there are people out there just waiting to hear each of us, that people that are going to, some people are really going to resonate with me. Some people are really going to resonate with you. Some people are really going to resonate with somebody else. Maybe some will resonate with both of us, whatever, but the more voices we have on these kind of topics, the more we can expand people's consciousness and expand the collective consciousness. So I don't believe in competition. I believe that we are all just peers working side by side for the same goal of, creating a more expanded consciousness on planet Earth. So, and raising the collective vibration to the point where eventually, hundreds of years down the line, probably things like war and hatred and bigotry won't even be able to exist in the frequency that we are creating together. So, I feel really good about putting my voice out there, and I feel confident that there are going to be a lot of people that it resonates with, because I'm just trying to be as genuine and transparent as I can. And I think that I know, as as authentic as I can. And I know that that is always appealing to people, because I am also a consumer of podcasts and media, and the people that I gravitate toward are the ones who are really authentic and real.
Yeah, it's
So,
super magnetic.
yeah, I'm just really trying to be myself. And I know there will be people that appreciate it and want to hear it.
That's amazing. And you said the word transparency, and I want to reference one of the shows that you just recorded, and I just listened to yesterday. I love it. It's all about thanking people for receiving you. So people listen to your podcast and they really like what you have to say. And I love what you say in it, because you basically say, like, hey, listen, like, yeah, I want to be received and I want to be seen, and I want, yes, I want listeners. And having this kind of hidden agenda, it's very Piscean to be like, oh, I'm just putting myself out there and like maybe someone will listen. It's like, no, of course we have a hidden fame agenda, but it's not hidden. Nothing's hidden in this age. So you know how has that how does it feel to be received by others, and how does it feel to kind of very openly uh you know openly share your agenda, quote unquote?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. It feels amazing. It feels so amazing not to have to keep any secrets. And I really think in this age, we can all see through it when somebody's not being totally real, and they're being kind of fake. Like, we all see through that in 5 seconds. And I just don't think there's room for that anymore, for hidden agendas, hidden motives. So yeah, with that particular episode, I was acknowledging that while I am very sincerely putting out the podcast as an offering to the collective to help and inspire people and raise our collective vibration, there's also another level in which it's a very personal project, um, to move toward and embody the energy of my North Node, which is in Leo, and to step into the spotlight and to say, okay, I want to do something that's public. I have a desire to be heard and recognized and seen. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. And actually, learning about my natal chart has been super empowering in that respect. And you were really like such a big teacher for me with starting to learn about astrology. Um, so now that I know that I have this North Node in Leo in the ninth house, I'm just like, oh, this makes perfect sense that I'm doing this podcast. And it is on a personal level um, about being seen, maybe even garnering a little bit of fame. That is part of the Leo energy. Um, so
Completely.
it's a lot of people are after that kind of thing. So why not just admit it when we are? We all want to be seen, we all want to be recognized, we all want to be appreciated to one degree or another. So let's just admit it.
Yeah. And actually, as you're talking, I'm thinking about it and like our hidden agenda that we're trying to be like, oh, like, I'm just putting this out there for you guys. Like, we all have Leo somewhere in our chart. So somewhere in our life, we want to be on the stage. We just do.
Mhm.
And so everyone has this. So everyone has a fame agenda somewhere in some energetic manifestation of that. I think it's interesting though, because I think we kid ourselves about wanting that because it's almost like, is it safe to want that? Is it safe to be seen in that way? Is it safe, maybe to be someone who's in a public forum? That's one level. But also, like, what if it doesn't happen? I think that there's this big insecurity that underlies a lot of the reason why people don't take the first step and do things, in that they're like scared, like, well, if I put myself out there, if I say I'm going to, I mean, think of like Babe Ruth, I'm going to hit that ball over that fence right there, and then does it. But what if he didn't? Then it would be like a little embarrassing, but like, who cares? Move on, right?
Mhm.
But I think that no one makes that step of like, who cares, move on. I think that there's a little bit of this like, ooh, well, what if what am I going to tell my friends? What am I going to tell them if I'm going around saying I'm going to start this podcast? You're putting yourself in a place where you're going to be held accountable for that to some degree. It's not like a big deal. Like, they're just going to be like, hey, where's your podcast? And you're going to be like, oh, I haven't done it yet. Or, hey, I did it. And I just think that's an interesting thing to acknowledge your own hidden agenda. Like, do people even know what their own hidden agenda is?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I mean, you have to really spend a lot of time being in touch with yourself. Again, back to this meditation, spiritual practice, spending time alone. But
Do
let's
you
see what
have
else.
do you have a specific meditation that you're really resonating with right now while you're putting this out there?
Yeah, I'm doing the clearing the arc line and karma meditation, which is I'm doing for 31 minutes. It's a Kundalini meditation. And I feel like let's see, I started that in late June, I think. And then I started working on the podcast just a few weeks later. So I actually do feel like it was some kind of catalyst. Like the meditation, when you do it, it's like this, you're lifting your arms and it's almost like you're pouring water on yourself, is kind of the motion. And I feel like it's helped to clear away some of the like shadows or obstacles that maybe were preventing me from just doing it, just starting this thing, just putting myself out there. I really do feel like it has cleared away some of the cobwebs or some of the karma.
That's beautiful. I'll put that in the show notes so that everyone can check that out if they want. Um, is there anything that you have that you're like working on right now that you're like, kind of thinking about, that you're in a new gestation process about?
Um, well, let's see. Our episode is about to come out tomorrow, the one where I interviewed you. But on a grander scheme, I'm so What you were saying about, if you try, then what if you fail? I think that you have to hold your own vision so strongly that there's no option of failure. And I think it's really useful also to ask other people to hold the vision for you and to kind of talk about it and get specific about, like, this is my goal, this is my vision, so that others can be energetically holding that for you. Because the more sort of projection that we have going toward a thing, the more quickly, the more readily it manifests into physical reality. So I'm really holding this strong vision right now for the podcast to really be something huge, and I'm taking little steps every day toward that. Um, but I'm just thinking about, my beyond that, I'm thinking about the rest of my life, my future life, and kind of my personal life, because I went through such terrible heartbreak back in October, and the sort of shattering of dreams that I had. I was going to get married to the love of my life, and then he just left one day. And it's kind of like, whoa, where do you go from there? How do you pick yourself up after that and make a new plan? But I'm starting to formulate a new plan, which was actually the same vision I had when I was with that ex partner. And I thought that when he left, that the vision had to leave too, but it actually hasn't. I still want the same thing. I still want to live in a beautiful place in nature. I want to have an amazing partnership. I want to have 2 kids. I want to be working on creative projects like the podcast, and maybe writing a memoir, and spending time in nature every day, and maybe growing a garden wherever it is, and having like kind of a wellness and community center where I can teach yoga and other people can come in and host events, and we can have cow ceremonies and visiting musicians, and like having a few different cabins on the property where, artists and residents can come and live and can offer their medicine, whatever it may be, at our wellness space. So, this is really my grand long term vision for my life. And to just be doing 100% this kind of work that is really fulfilling to me, like making this podcast. Right now, I'm still doing some of the journalism work that has been my whole previous career. And I'm looking to be able to transition out of that. So I'm holding very strongly this whole vision of my future. And if anybody else wants to hold that for me, I would really appreciate it. I just made a podcast episode actually about the power of holding each other in our prayers and holding one another's visions. I think it is extremely powerful. So that is my plan.
So powerful. I'm definitely holding that vision, and I hope some of you listening will as well. So I have one more question for you, and it is, what is the perfect day? What does it look like to you? What's your perfect day?
Perfect day. Well, the perfect day definitely involves going to Kundalini yoga class at Rama, here in Venice, and then spending some time in the sunshine. I really think that we've been told a lot of lies about the sun. I think it's actually extremely healing for the body. So I like to nude sunbathe every day if I can. I don't let myself burn, that isn't healthy. But I think that exposing your whole body to the sun is extremely healthy. So that's in there. Then, having a beautiful organic lunch, and maybe working on the podcast, having an interview, or making an episode. And then either going for a hike in Malibu or Topanga, which I love, up in the canyons, or going to the beach and taking a dip in the ocean, which is so cleansing for the aura. So I'm coming to realize how much I really require time in nature. So that has to be a part of every perfect day. And then I love cooking. So probably cooking dinner and going to bed early, which I also love.
I love that so much. I think it's so cool to talk about the perfect day, because really that's all we're ever, when we're talking about big future visions and stuff, but it's always what is that immediate day looking like, the next couple of hours, the evening, and how can we just like do those things now? Like if there's anything, like, can you go in the ocean right now? Like if you haven't gone in it today, maybe, you know, how can you do that every day? Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Jenny. I can't wait to talk to you again and see how all of this evolves and all the different ways that we're going to keep intersecting. I'm so, so grateful for your friendship.
Oh, I feel the same way. I'm so excited to see what the future holds for us both.
Ditto. All right, Satnam. Till next time.
Bye.